So in today's video, I'm going to make another stencil using a circle this time, and I'm using Canvas Workspace, the download program, because this program has got the align and distribute function. So I'm going to see if it's any quicker or easier to do it this way. So the first thing I'm going to do is drag on a circle. I'm going to come to the editing icon, so 0.25. I'm going to right click and hit duplicate, or an alternative is while it's selected, if you come to the layers panel and come down here at the bottom, there's a duplicate icon. So I'm going to duplicate this now several times. I think I'll do 13. I'm not sure how many I'm going to need. So I've got 15. So I'm going to highlight them all. I'm going to come back to the editing icon up here. I'm going to line them all up along the top, and I'm just going to click off, and actually they look as though they're distributed quite well. So I'm just going to zoom in. I might make them a little bit more spaced out. So I'm going to select the last one, and using the 4 directional arrows on my keyboard, I'm going to use the right hand arrow and I'm going to move it over several spaces and then stop. I'm just going to click off, so you can now see I've got a big gap between this one here and this one here. I'm going to select everything again, and then this time I'm going to come down to where it says distribute space, and I'm going to choose horizontal distribution and see what happens. Now obviously they've gone an inch apart because that's what the spacing is set for here. So if I take the spacing down to 1/4 inch apart and do it again and then click away, you'll now see that these 1/4 inch circles have a 1/4 inch gap in between them, and they're all lined up perfectly. So I'm going to select them all, right click and make them a group. Now I'm going to right click and create a duplicate. I'm going to ungroup this second row, click anywhere on the page to deselect and get rid of that last one, and just hit the delete on my keyboard. So I've now got an odd number on the top and I've got an even number again spaced here. So I'm just going to select this second row, right click and group, and now I'm going to highlight both, and I'm going to come back down here to where it says distribute, and this time I'm going to use distribute vertically and click off. And you'll now see that because I had the 1/4 inch still set here, it's distributed the second line 1/4 inch below the first. So using the align and distribute in the Canvas Workspace program downloadable version is a lot easier for doing things like this that you want lined up specifically. So now I'm going to drag an imaginary box around both, and I'm going to group them. Then I'm going to right click and duplicate them. I'm just going to bring them down here out of the way, and I'm going to select them, right click and duplicate them, and I'm going to duplicate another one, and drag it down here. I'm going to select everything and I'm going to come back to this distribute vertically. It's still set at 1/4 inch, and when I click off, it's aligned each group of these 2 rows to be 1/4 inch apart. I think I need more, so I'm going to select another one and to make it quicker, I'm going to come back to the layers panel and I'm going to make 2 more. I'm going to select everything, go back to the editing icon, still got 1/4 inch distribution here, and distribute them vertically. Now they've gone a bit out of alignment, so I'm going to line them all up on the left edge by using the align icon here. So now I've got a set of circles. I'm just going to drag an imaginary box around everything and right click and make them all a group. So I'm going to come back up here now to my basic shapes and I'm going to drag on a square. The square I'm going to make 6 inches like I did in my last video. And then obviously now I've got too many circles to fit within this square, but that's fine because I was only guessing how many I needed. So if I select all the circles and drag them down, I want a bit of a gap on the side here for when I'm doing my stencil work, and a bit of a gap obviously on the side here. So I think I only need probably from the first one to maybe this one. So I'm going to ungroup all these circles. I'm going to ungroup each of the sections. And then I'm going to have to ungroup each row. So I'm selecting them all and I'm going to go to ungroup and see what happens. And now it's each one of these circles is an individual circle. So I think that if I just click onto this square, I think I probably need to get rid of anything after this circle here. So I'm going to drag an imaginary box just around here and hit delete. And if it's not right, I can always undo. Then I'm going to bring my square down here, and again I want a gap at the top and a gap at the bottom. So I think that I'm probably going to have to get rid of these bottom 2 rows. And again, I'm just going to hit the delete key on my keyboard. I'm just going to move the square out of the way. I'm going to drag an imaginary box around all these individual circles now and right click and make them a group. So now when I select all the circles and the square and come to align and distribute and align them centrally and vertically, I can see how they're going to fit within that square. And I think that will be fine because you need to have a gap around the edge of your stencil, because depending on what you're using, you don't want, stencil media or ink or whatever it is you're using getting over the edge of your stencil onto your work. So when I click in the middle here now, the square's selected, so that tells me it's the square that's on top. So I want to send that to the bottom. So I'm going to right click, go to arrange and go send to back. So when I click again in the middle, the circles are now selected. So I know they're on top, and to do the next process, they have to be on top of the square. I'm going to drag an imaginary box around everything and come over here to subtract, and that's going to punch the circles out of this square. So this is all one object now. So if I fill it with colour, you'll see that I've got a square with a stack of circles that are 1/4 of an inch circles distributed with a 1/4 of an inch space in between them on the horizontal and distributed with a 1/4 of a space between them on the vertical. So this is now another stencil. So from here, I think this is where a lot of people get confused about how they save their files when they're using the downloadable program. So if I go to the top of my page that you can't quite see here and go File and Save, this brings up a save box. So if I put in it here, Circle Stencil, and save it just on my desktop, that file is saved as a Canvas Workspace download program, which, if you can see here, the extension is CWPRJ. Now that won't work in your machine. That is just a working file. So you can save a working file onto your computer so that you can come back and add to it if you wanted to at a later date. To save this file as a cut file, you need to go back up to the top of the page to File, and you need to go to Export FCM or Transfer FCM. Now, depending on which one you choose is determined by whether you've got Wi-Fi. If you click Export FCM, and if I just leave it as the same name, Circle Stencil, and put it on my desktop and save and drag it in, you'll now see that this one is an FCM. So this is your cutting file. And that, as I say, is from using export. So what you would do with that, you would drag this Circle Stencil FCM onto a USB stick that you've inserted into your computer, and then you take that to the ScanNCut, put your USB stick into your machine and go to Retrieve Data and find that file. I've got wireless, so I'm going to go to File, Transfer FCM via the internet. And it says the registered machine is ready to download the transferred file from the internet, and I say OK. And that's all there is to it. And when I go over to my machine, now I've got two ScanNCut machines. I've got the CM900 and I've got the SDX2200 Disney machine. When I go to either of those machines and switch them on and go to Retrieve Data, that file will be there. So that's how you save your files that you're creating in the Canvas download program. So you've got several options. You've got Save, which just creates you a working file, and that will be saved onto your computer. You've got Export as FCM, which will export the file to your computer and you then drag that onto a USB stick, or you've got Transfer via Wi-Fi. I am now going to make another project using this stencil. So stay with me and I'll show you what I'm going to do with it. So this is just my domestic home laminator. I've plugged it in and I've switched it on, and I've waited for it to tell me that it's ready. So it's all lit up. And this is what I used. These are just photo laminating pouches. I've had these years. I honestly don't know where I got them from, but I would think it would probably be somewhere like, if you're in the UK, maybe WH Smith's or Staples, something like that. I honestly can't remember. It says photo pouches gloss, but for me it doesn't really matter because I'm not going to be using them to laminate photographs. And they're 8 by 10 and they're 200 micron. Not quite sure what all that means, to be honest, but it worked last time, so I'm hoping it'll work this time. So I'm just going to grab one of the pouches. So you can see it's just a, you know, a normal laminating pouch. Now, this particular laminator doesn't need a carrier sheet. I used to have a laminator where you put your pouch in between like a piece of card and sent it through, but this one doesn't need it. But what I am going to do is put the folded edge in first. So I'm just going to put it into the slot until the machine grabs it and then just let it go through. So this might take a few minutes because it's very, very slow, but I'll show you when it comes out. Okay, you can just see the last of the laminating pouch going into the machine now, and it's coming out the back here. One thing I forgot to say about this laminator, you can use it cold or hot. I've obviously got it on hot because I want to seal it, you know, well. That's it now, all laminated together. Don't know if you can hear that. I'll just show you on the side. I'll turn it off. So there's cold, off or hot, and I had it on hot. So that is now the laminated pouch that I'm going to use as a stencil. So I've got my mat, and this is the mat for the SDX model, and the way I know that is that it says DX on the bottom here and it's got the hangy hole and it's only got one arrow because you can only put these mats in one way, unlike the CM900. And this is the low tack mat, and this is the only mat I've used as long as I've owned this machine, which was since just before Christmas. I've not had the need to use my standard mat yet. So here's my laminator pouch. I'm going to put it on the mat, which you're probably not going to be able to see very well. Going to get my spatula and I'm just going to rub it down and make sure that it's all fully stuck. So I'm going to load this mat now into the machine. And I'm going to do a background scan. I'm just going to go into settings and put the background onto dark. So you might not be able to see this, but I can now see where my laminating pouch is. So I'm going to drag my stencil onto it and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to select cut and I'm going to select go. And obviously, because the beauty of this machine is that I don't have to set a cut pressure or a blade depth or anything. So now I'm just going to say start. It's going to test the mat. This is the noisiest part of this machine. It's testing the media that's on my mat. And now it's starting to cut. And it's a whole lot quieter than the CM machine, this new machine. It's whisper quiet. Okay, so it's nearly finished now. It's just cutting the outline. And that's it done. So I can say, okay, I can unload the mat. peel away the waste and you can see that's cut perfectly. And there is my stencil. So let me just move this out of the way. I think just one stray circle dropped out there. So not sure how well you're going to see this. Let's see what we can find. There you go. Put it on a piece of card so you can see. So that's my stencil, all perfectly cut from a laminating pouch. So I'm now going to use this in a project.